Welcome to J Hart Model Works and part 2 of the scratch-built 1/24th scale fire extinguisher build. If you've not watched part 1, I would suggest pausing this video and click the link to the part 1 in the description to get caught up to how we got to this point. Then come back to watch as we finish the fire extinguisher, starting with the handle. Booking my workbench, let's get started. So next up, we're going to take a piece of 0.02 inch thick styrene sheet. I've just cut a small piece of it, and we're going to mark this off so that we have about 1.5 millimeters wide strip. So we're just going to use our metal ruler and a ultra fine tip Sharpie. Mark this at about 1.5 millimeters roughly on both ends. And then we can use the metal ruler as a straight edge, and we'll cut that with our hobby knife to get a nice straight-ish strip of styrene. So we're going to take our strip of styrene, we're going to cut off that bad section at the end, and this is going to give us a piece that we can work with for making our handle. We're going to take our 240 grit thinny stick, and sorry I got off the camera frame there, but you're going to sand roughly at about a 45-ish degree angle against the bottom corner. You don't want to sand the whole thing, but you just want to basically sand an angle into it. And this is going to cause the top part of our handle to stand up at an angle. And this will give the separation between the top and bottom handle pieces. So we're going to take our cutters, we're going to cut this down a bit. And then we're going to go ahead and take our sander again, and we're going to sand right on the corners, and we just want to round the end of the handle off. This gives it a more finished look than just having the square end. And that's the top half of our handle done. So now we're going to work on the bottom portion of our handle. In the brown glass bowl is some water that I had boiled. It's cooled a little bit now, but it's still very hot. What we're going to do is we're going to take the remaining piece of our plastic from where we made the top part of our handle. We're just going to dip it in that hot water and use some pliers to kind of bend it a little bit. We want to make a curve in this. So we're going to take it and we're going to dip it into the hot water. Then we're going to dip it into the cold water to cool it off. Dip it back into the hot water. Get it hot and move it some more. Bend it some more. Cool it back off. And just back and forth until we get the shape that we want. So now that we got the shape pretty much where we want it, we're just going to take our plastic nippers And we're just going to cut the end off and trim it down so it's not quite as long. We don't want that long of a piece. Okay, so here you can see we've got our bend in here at the bottom half of our handle. And what we're going to do next is just use the first piece for the top of our handle to measure out a length so that we can cut the bottom end off. Just going to scoot that out of the way for a second. We're going to give it a quick bend to get it back into the shape we want. And like the top part, we're just going to sand the corners to round off the back end of the handle. There we go. Nice, smooth, rounded handle. So now we're going to take some aluminum. I just use soda can and I sand off the paint so I have some nice clean aluminum surface. And we're going to cut a strip that's about 1.5 millimeters to 2 millimeters wide. And we want it to be definitely long enough to fold over the handle. So what we're going to do is put this in between our two handle pieces and then fold the corners down, and it's going to hide where the handle glues onto the neck, and it'll give it a much more realistic appearance. So I use soda caps for holding my super glue in. Beer caps, soda caps. So they make great little containers. They're also great for mixing small amounts of custom paints in. So you just put a dab in there and then get your glue applicator, which I made this using an old sewing needle. My wife does cross stitch, and when she gives me one of her old broken sewing needles to throw away, I just take my rotary tool and I cut off the top half of the eye and I just put it inside a pin vise. And this allows me to pick up glue using capillary action. So it just pulls a little bit of glue up between those two tines, and then you can really get in and place that glue with a lot of precision. Another really nice thing about this tool is that when you're done and you need to clean it up, you just take a lighter and set fire to the dried super glue, and it dries out perfectly clean. So I just picked up a tiny bit, just a tiny little drop of super glue, put it on my metal. I'm going to take one of my pieces and I'm going to put one of the handle pieces in where we got that drop of super glue right there. Now to speed this up, I'm going to use a little bit of super glue accelerator and just dab that on there, and that'll instantly set that super glue so we can move on to the next part. So we flipped it over, and now we're going to put the other side of our handle on. So we really want to make sure this is the top side. We want to make sure we glue it on that angle we sanded in so that this will sit at an angle and it'll give us some space and a more realistic look. Just use some tweezers, get everything lined up, make sure everything's in place. Go ahead and press in to make sure that our piece sits at the right angle. Try real hard not to knock it out of alignment. And just carefully get that in place and lined up and pressed down and glued home. So once again, we're going to hit this with some superglue accelerator. Going to speed up the curing process so we can move on to our next step. So it's a little blurry, but you can kind of get the idea of the shape we're going for. Next, we're going to start bending the sides down over the bottom of the handle. We're going to take our tweezers and we're going to just carefully bend down the metal that sticks out past the other side. When you glue the handle parts on, you want to leave some material on both sides so that we can bend it down. Then we're going to take and bend down the other side as well. So once you have both sides bent down, you should end up with something that looks about like this. And our next step is going to be to paint these up and get this glued on to our fire extinguisher. So we have our fire extinguisher painted in Tamia LP7 Pure Red. And we have our handle, which we have painted in Tamia LP38 Flat Aluminum. And here I've taken some of the 1/16 inch rod and I've just sprayed the end of it in Tamia LP48 Sparkling Silver. Alright, so we're going to take our handle and we're going to take a pair of scissors and just trim off the aluminum that sticks out the other side. We're using that as a handle so that we could hold it while we were painting, but we don't need that and we need to get that trimmed off and nice and clean before we glue this onto our fire extinguisher. So what I should have done at this point was to mask off the tank on our fire extinguisher and paint the nozzle and the neck with the LP38 flat aluminum, but I didn't. And I will catch that later on and I'll fix that. I'll just use some Vallejo silver. But instead, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to put just a drop of super glue on the top of our fire extinguisher. And then we're going to glue our handle into place. Looking good so far. So now we're going to take our piece of 1/16 inch rod and our display cutters, and we're just going to cut a sliver of this off the top. Grab some super glue, put it on whichever side you want to be facing up. Just going to put that right there. And then we're going to use our tweezers. Nope, not your fingers. Use your tweezers. There you go. And we're going to pick up that sliver and just drop that right into place on the side of the fire extinguisher. And that's going to be the basis for we're really just going to paint it white, but that would be our gauge for our pressure to show that our fire extinguisher was charged. So we're going to hit this with some super glue kicker. And it's about this point that I realized that I messed up and didn't paint the nozzle and the neck. So just lay down a piece of tamia masking tape, drop some Vallejo Model Air Silver. I would really have preferred to have used the TS38. I forgot that I even did this, so this isn't on our materials list, but I'm just going to go ahead and dip our brush in here. I'm very careful. I'm using a 000 brush. I think this is a Winsor & Newton Series 7 000 that I use. Just get in here and very carefully paint in the nozzle and the neck. That looks much better. Alright, so just like our silver, we're going to take our Model Air white and put a drop in our tamia tape. This isn't the reason at all why there's paint all over my cutting mat. So we're going to take our .05 mechanical pencil and we're going to dip this in that white paint and use it as a super fine paintbrush to paint into the gauge, the white part of the gauge center. I tried to get up closer. That didn't really help because the camera didn't zoom. There, looks just like that. So the fire extinguisher is done, but we're not. I'm going to go ahead and make a bracket for holding it. It gives just a little extra detail when we put this in the car. So we're going to take some more of our soda can. We're going to get a rough idea of how far we want. Just going to use this to measure a little bit, and then we're going to cut out a chunk. Let's give us a rough estimate here and cut a chunk out for the base of our bracket. Okay, so we use the X-Acto knife to score a mark in there. We're going to use the scissors and trim this up on the bottom and just cut a piece off so that we can begin making our base. Again, we use our fire extinguisher to do a little measuring. Now I'm going to take some flat pliers that I have for my jewelry making, and I'm just going to use them to bend. You can use a photo etch bender if you have one. I don't have one, so I just use these nice flat pliers. And then I'm going to switch it around to the other side, and I'm going to bend it up on the other side as well. So we form kind of a J out of our aluminum. And our fire extinguisher will fit just right in there, about like that. We're going to take and cut along the back side. There we go. So next, we're going to take and we're going to trim the corners off of this. Let's take our scissors, cut it at an angle. This is going to give them a more rounded, finished appearance. We're going to take our UMP thinny stick. This is the 240 grit, and we're just going to sand these edges and just round this a bit and get it nice and clean. So I took the bracket and I sprayed it with some UMP black primer. So you want to set everything out, figure out how you want it set out in your car or wherever you're placing this. But you want to lay it out, figure out how you want it. I've already done this. And then you're going to take some super glue and we're just going to glue the fire extinguisher into the bracket. Kind of fiddly. We don't want to get glue all over everything. I ended up using the gauge, just using my tweezers and picking it up by our pressure gauge and finally getting that set in place. All right, we're almost done. If you stuck around this long, thank you so much. I appreciate it greatly. So the last thing we want to do is we want to make a retaining strap. So we're going to take another piece of our aluminum. We're just going to take our scissors here and cut a strip, a nice thin strip. We're then going to take another piece of our 1/8 inch rod, which is about the size of our fire extinguisher, and we're just going to bend this strip around this to get it to shape. It's easier to just use a clean rod than it is to try and bend it around the fire extinguisher itself. We don't want to break anything loose or anything of that nature. Just go ahead and do some test fitting, and we're going to trim this up right about here. We're going to take our super glue and we're going to super glue that in place. Our last step, we're going to take our scissors and we're going to trim the excess off on the clip, if I can hang on to it properly. Maybe just a little bit more here. And there we go. If you stuck with me to the end, thank you very much. I know this one was a bit long. Let me know in the comments what you think of this kind of scratch building series. Are they too long? Are they okay? Is it better splitting them up into parts like I did this topic? Is there anything specific you'd like to see covered? I enjoy your feedback and try to respond to as many comments as I can. Please don't forget to hit the like button and leave a comment on your way out. If you're not already subscribed, consider subscribing and clicking the bell icon to be notified when I post new content, and maybe consider sharing the video with others you think might enjoy it. As always, thanks for watching and have a great day.